Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. People are starting to come into the room. We'll wait a couple of minutes to let everybody get in. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're logging in from. That's what's always so exciting about Stage 32 is we truly are a global community. So there are people logging on from all over the country, all over the world. So welcome. Let's give everybody a couple more minutes to get settled. Let's share. I see people coming into the room. Welcome, everybody. And let's see. I see people still coming into the room, so we're going to give people just one more minute to come in. And as you're coming in, I'd like to say welcome to this very special Stage 32 webinar today on breaking down the script. We're going to be doing a deep dive into the script, the pilot script for Succession. We're going to dig in and find out about the fabulously deceitful Roy family and what has made that script such a wonderful read, and also what has contributed to the success based on the script the script and how beautiful it is and how well constructed it is, right, Will?
That's exactly right, and thanks for having me here. I'm very excited to discuss this. I was telling Rosamond earlier that I feel like we need like 3 or 4 hours to do the script justice, because it is so deep and so multifaceted, and it leads to obviously a multi-Emmy winning series. So I think it's kind of one of the perfect pilots to go through this exercise in, and hopefully everyone, I think Rosamond, correct me if I'm wrong, but they'll get the pilot afterwards, right? So hopefully they'll be able to pull some of what I'm discussing today and kind of find the same things and more things, honestly, using the same sort of tactics, tools, and things like that.
Absolutely. So if you're just joining us, I'm Rosamond Purdue. I am on the education team of Stage 32, and welcome from wherever you're tuning in from and whatever time of day it is. And welcome whether this is your first Stage 32 webinar or if it's your 100th. We are so excited to have you here. We wanted to say welcome. Before we kick everything off, I wanted to do a quick introduction and overview of Stage 32 and what Stage 32 is. Stage 32 is a global community of almost 1 million members of creatives and creators from almost every single country on the planet. We are a partner with some wonderful prestigious brands, including Netflix, Cannes Film Festival, American Film Market, Variety, dozens of film festivals and commissions, and many other industry-leading entities. And we are the global leaders in entertainment. We actually have the world's largest film education library with over 2,000 webinars and classes taught by industry leaders such as Will. We have over 3,000 industry professionals who come and mentor people within our community. If you aren't a member yet, please, I'm going to put it in the chat right here. Please log on. It's free. It's fast. You can set up your own profile. It will take probably about 30 seconds. But once you're there, you will be a member and a part of our community. They say that entertainment is built on relationships, and that certainly is true. It's also built on collaboration. And so there, when you're in Stage 32, you'll be automatically connected to this global network, and you'll find your tribe. You really will find your people, whether you're an animator or a writer or a producer or an actor, your people are there. And so after this webinar, I would say go hang out in the lounges. We have over 200,000 discussions and conversations going on over on the site right now. So it's a very robust community, free to join. And as a perk for attending today, you will get the download of the pilot script that Will is going to go over with you, and it's going to break down. You'll get that so you can review it. go over his notes, going over everything that he discussed. So you'll get that once you become a Stage 32 member, and we will send that to you within your Stage 32 profile. And then one extra special thing, if you hang out till the end, we are giving away a really cool special gift for everyone who stays with us till the end. And I'm excited to share it with you. So that's our little secret that's at the very end of the presentation. Also, before we get going, I want to give you a little bit of lay of the land of how this is going to work. So Will is going to do it. Pardon me, Will is going to do a very quick intro, and then he's going to get right into it and break down all of the elements of the script, all of the characters, the tone, the elements, everything that makes the script really successful. Afterwards, he's going to have a Q&A. And if you look on the GoToWebinar control panel, if you look, there is a little arrow that says questions, and that's a question box. And I see some people have already typed in questions, so please go there, type in the questions. As soon as Will is finished with his presentation, I'm going to be asking him questions so he can answer for you. So I'm excited to get going. And if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Drop them in the question box and we will get to them. I know there's a lot of people here. It's really exciting. I'm sure we're gonna have lots of questions. So Will get to as many as he can. And so before I hand it over, I have to give you a little bit of an overview of who Will McCants is. We're so excited to have him today. He's one of Stage 32's favorite and beloved educator. He teaches with us and is in the writer's room and does a lot of mentoring, so we're really lucky to have him. Will is currently Vice President of Production for Ian Bryce Productions, which they have produced films like Saving Private Ryan, Almost Famous, the Transformers franchise. Will has worked on TV shows, including The Boys, and I Know What You Did Last Summer for Amazon, Preacher for AMC, SWAT for CBS, Max Tilt for HBO Max, and lots of other things, but we don't have enough time to go over all of them. So Will, without further ado, I know everyone wants to hear from you, so take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here, and you know, I'm happy to have the opportunity to break down a show as successful as Succession. A lot of what I do in my current job is reading new material, features, TV, all of the above, and doing kind of this process. So when Stage 32 came to me to try to see if we could crack this nut, I really jumped at the opportunity because I think it's very important as writers, directors, producers, whatever your vocation is, to understand how to pick the nuances out of scripts, especially something as successful as Succession, and how you can apply a lot of these same tactics and elements to your own writing or your own producing, directing. So how I want to structure this a little bit is not so much lecture, but a little bit more as bringing in how you can better your own writing, better understand your own stories through the analysis of this pilot. And for those of you that have not seen the show, I know that I had not read the pilot until it was given to me. I had seen the show. I haven't seen the pilot in many years since it came out. So I debated going back and watching it, and then I remember thinking, you know what? No, I'm going to read the pilot clean. I'm going to sort of see how it stacks up against the actual pilot episode. And from my memory, they're actually quite similar. They're very close, hand in hand, and that's a testament to the writing, I think. And we'll talk all about that as we go. But it is important, I think, to after today, and I'll screen share, and you'll see the script, and I'll read some pages and excerpts. I think it's important to heed my analysis, if you will, and then try to dig in even further. And for those of you that have just jumped on, earlier I did say that you'd need 3 hours, I think, to really break down this script. In a holistic way, because there's just so much going on, and the ensemble is second to none on TV. So that being said, I want to run through quickly the sort of the introduction. I have some goals here, and aside from learning to break down the hit pilot, and I will screen share also my own sort of physical scan of how I break down scripts, and in the end I think we can run through that quickly just so everyone sort of sees how I was able to pick out the information I'm picking out, and again, this is my own way of doing it, but I think you find your own methods. But I do think there's a huge opportunity here, as I said earlier, to better understand the elements of TV writing and storytelling. We work primarily in feature film, but like Rosamund said, we do the Transformers movies. We've done 9 of the last 10 Michael Bay movies. And a lot of what we do is in that feature form length, but with a pilot, with a TV series, which is, I have background in as well. A lot of the elements in these scripts have to have legs for multiple seasons. And that's the series, whether it be 3 seasons, 5 seasons, 10 seasons. So what you're setting up in your pilot is going to have ripple effects throughout the entire series. And we'll talk more about that. So one of the goals here is to honestly, through Succession, to better understand just the different elements of TV writing and storytelling on the whole. Through that, we want to talk about character intros, character arcs, how you set up arcs. The arcs obviously will not be closed because it's the pilot episode, and knock on wood, hopefully with your pilots, there are more episodes to come. Also, we're going to talk a lot about the ensemble because TV is known to be character, but what happens when those characters start sharing equal amounts of screen time or drama or conflict, in this case, a family, and those surrounding the family. So there's a really interesting case study in Succession that I think everyone, and myself, and I actually learned a ton of, through the process of doing this. So I'm blessed to have had the opportunity. I do want to talk about tone also, and as part of the element. Now, where that does become a little tricky is that I think a lot of us have probably seen the show, so we know the tone of the show. So it is a biased analysis of tone, opposed to, if I was reading one of your scripts, the tone of that script has to be there, and I have no preconceived understanding of what that tone is. So for Succession, it's a little bit, like I said, informed by the actual show itself. So, forgive me for that. And the last one is really understanding conflict and how to, set up conflict, tee it up, how to pay it off, how to, and how specifically this script does it, and how maybe you can, borrow some of those methods that the writer used and use it in your own writing. But this is a clinic in conflict, especially setting up conflict to come and doing it in a multi-layered way that is very sophisticated, and you can see why this show has become what it has become. So first and foremost, so like I said, this is, I think, a lesson in writing. It's a lesson in storytelling. That's my goal here. I want to introduce things that some of you may not be aware of. Something I call conflict stacking, which is sort of like when it rains, it pours sort of model of boxing a character in. As I mentioned earlier, tee-ups and payoffs, how to unpack story as you go, how to unpack character as you go, how to plant a seed of something that's going to grow into conflict in a future episode where it doesn't feel like it's come and gone. And the last one is really just how to lay breadcrumbs for the reader to go back and think, oh, that was set up here and now it's being paid off here. That's a very sophisticated way of writing. And I think that's kind of the first mark when it comes to a senior writer, is someone that understands how to set up that conflict that way. So I want everyone to think, when you read the script, to think critically about the story. I do want to help inform your writing and understand other people's writing. So hopefully some of the methods and things we talked about here are that will translate to analysis of your own scripts or friends' scripts or partner scripts or whatever it might be. I want to talk a little bit also about what's the point of a pilot in today's straight to streaming world. We'll save that for the end in case we run out of time. But in this case, you want to make sure that your information is in the script before, because there might not be a second episode. So you have to, balance what is going to be, laid out in the pilot rather than and saved for later or saved for later. So we'll talk about that at the very end because, that's a very circumstantial thing. So last thing I want to say before we hop into it, I do want to sort of have it with a disclaimer and say that I purposefully derived my notes from the pilot script. I've read it as if I had no idea what was going to happen in the series, although I do know what happens in the series. So when I talk about theme and pilot theme and the core theme story engines of this episode, I'm specifically referring to what I pulled out about this episode. It's going to change, it's going to evolve, and we'll talk about that when we get there. And then the last thing I want to say about this is in your own writing, and you'll see in the script, every line matters. Every time someone says something, there's a point to it. Page real estate is beachfront real estate. And if there's anything that feels fatty about your own scripts or something that you are writing, then there's something wrong. In this script, there is, I would say, 0 lines of fat. It is every single thing has purpose. Every single thing is informing the theme or conflict or character or any of those things. So before we hop in, I wanted to say those things. And of course, if you have questions at the end, I'll answer them. But without that, I think we hop in. So let me share my screen for you. So bear with me one moment. I want to make sure everyone sees Succession here. Rosamund, can everyone see this?
I don't see your screen.
Okay, so I have this screen sharing issue quickly, so give me 1 second. Sorry, everyone.
There's always a technology,
There's always a technology problem. Okay, here. Well, this is what I'll do. I'll do what we practiced. So bear with me.
Will is getting his technology sorted out. And while we're doing that, I'll just remind everybody to head over to stage32.com. Also, I wanted to let you know that if you missed a part of this, don't worry, because we will be sending out the broadcast. We will be sending out the recording of this. So if you missed something, if you want to review it and get even more out of it, you will have that opportunity. Usually takes about 48 hours for us to get the recording out to you. That's going to be sent into your Stage 32 profile. So don't worry about that. And we will get you all set up. And there's Will.
All right. Now I'm back. Now it should work. So sorry about that. Technology is a little finicky sometimes.
Yep.
Rosamund, if you make me a presenter.
Let me presenter again.
Yes.
Let's see, and there we go, okay.
There we go, okay. Okay, so Succession. So I do want to give everyone a little bit of a plot outline because just in case, people are not familiar with sort of how the pilot unfolds. So I just jotted down a little opening here. So Succession follows a highly dysfunctional, presumably multi-billionaire family as they traverse the very bumpy terrain that is their family business. So it's this massive multimedia conglomerate called Royco, or it's called Comco in the script you can read. It was created by British writer Jesse Armstrong. It's heading into its 4th season at HBO, and it's won 9 Emmys so far and counting. So we all expect it to win many, many more. So now this pilot is what I like to call a hybrid premise pilot. That is to say, we're tuning into a specific moment in time where things are changing for our characters, the family in this case, the company. We get the feeling that history is repeating itself a little bit in the pilot. Maybe it's not, and that's the fun of Succession. And that's because the writing is fantastic. Great writing has this effect on you, where you don't know what the past holds, you don't know what the future holds. So we're going to break down all the elements of the full pilot shortly, but like all great pilots, we open on this abstract, sort of confusing scene. There's darkness, there's suspense. A man stumbles through the night, his voice is calling out in confusion. He's in a bedroom, but he's not sure whose bedroom it is. The lights explode on, and he's old, he's 80, and this is Logan Roy. He's the founder and CEO of one of the biggest multimedia companies in the world, and he's pissing in a closet. So he's smashed through a boardroom spectacle, and the ensemble of our show is introduced, and there's Kendall. He's Logan's second oldest son. We're not going to dig into this much deeper in a moment, but he's in the throes of this buyout negotiation. It's competitive, but we get the vibe that for Kendall, it's more of a proving ground rather than a bottom line driver. So then we jet over to London and we meet Shiv. She's Logan's daughter and her husband, Tom, and they're shopping for a birthday gift for Logan. See, it's his 80th birthday, and we'll talk more about these two in a moment. Then there's Greg. See, Greg's in his 20s, and he's the antithesis of the Roy family name. That's because he's Roy adjacent. Cousin Greg, as he'll become known, see, he's stoned out of his mind. He has this hulking frame stuffed inside a Royco theme park mascot suit. He's quickly fired when he finds himself vomiting through the eye holes of his jovial cartoon character costume. Clearly, his bosses have no idea who he is, and that's because he isn't anybody. He's going to find his way in this world, though, starting with attending his great uncle's 80th birthday party. So the pilot unfolds, and it becomes clear that Logan Roy is stepping down, and Kendall, from the deal at the beginning, is taking his place. Now, this isn't public knowledge yet, though. And Logan's 80th birthday party, he drops a bomb. He's not stepping down for reasons we'll get into in a moment. See, Kendall scrambles, but the icing on the cake, and this is conflict stacking, is a family trust issue, and in more ways than one. See, Logan wants to give his current wife number 3, his board seat when he passes. This gives her double votes, double the power, and it doesn't sit well with the kids. So who are these other kids, though? And by kids, I mean they're adults. Besides Kendall and Shiv, she's the whip-smart political climber that I brought up earlier, there is the family clown, Roman. There's the oldest son, Connor. He's a bit of an outcast. And we'll get into him a lot later, but he wants nothing really to do with the family, or does he? So, well, after the shocking news, the kids try to figure out how to play Logan's game. With each kid subtly going around one another to jockey for position in the company, but also within the family, it would seem. We're flown out to Long Island on 3 private choppers as the family plays this annual birthday party baseball game. But the scene courses with stress. See, Kendall's deal is on the brink of collapse. It's all going on simultaneously. He's just gotten the yellow light as CEO. He will not be promoted. And that's when he decides to leak to the press that his old man is losing his mind. He leaves the family game. He heads back to his deal with renewed swagger, and he wins. But like all things in the show, nothing is ever what it seems. So about that same time, the same old man who's losing his mind, Logan makes a decision to remove his most trusted ally from the company, a career man, Chief Operating Officer, COO, Frank. Now, there's a reason for this, and we'll go into that later. In the final scene, the remaining kids tell their father they are not going to sign his wife, Marcia, into a position of double voting, at least not right now. And to confirm our suspicions that family and business are one and the same, Logan's head quite literally explodes. He has a massive stroke, casting us into blackness until episode 2. So that's sort of the overview of that's the overview of the pilot, but I want to get into actually breaking it down because there's so much going on here that even a little 4-minute spiel won't do it justice. So before we hop into anything, I wanted to talk about story engines, which is theme. So what is a story engine? It's really what drives characters through the series, especially in TV when there's so much dialogue and there's so much conflict being created from contained scenes. We're watching it for theme. It's everything, and it evolves in TV. It changes as the series progresses. So that's why at the beginning I sort of gave the disclaimer that this is applicable to the pilot because it will change as the season goes on, as characters start to stab each other in the backs. We begin to like some, we begin to hate others, and that's the fun of Succession. So the core themes typically stay in a series, and that's something to just keep your eye on it as you're in your own writing, as you're analyzing shows that are currently on the air, is finding what is this story actually about. On the surface, yeah, you say it's about a family and they're running this company and sort of what I just pitched. But deeper down, there's a lot more happening, and that's why we're watching the show. So theme is everything. It's why characters change. It's why characters act the way that they do, and it's why we watch the show. It's what the series is really about. So in this case, Succession's about the personal failures of a professionally successful family. Succession's about the blurred lines between family and business. Succession is a family circus, which you'll see, or family theme park, if you will, that you'll see in future episodes. That's the one that's a little bit, but at its core, Succession is a story about a son trying to escape the eclipsing shadow of his father and a father's struggle to remain the son of his own family. Now, this is what I call the core of the pilot theme. That's to say, the main conflict will be between Kendall and Logan, his father, second oldest son and an aging father. Now, as the series progresses, of course, the ensemble will begin to orbit the two of them. But in the pilot specifically, this is what it's really about. It's an identity struggle. Succession is also power. Succession is corruption, and succession is Shakespeare. Of all the comps that exist, Shakespeare might be the most accurate. Now, tonally speaking, obviously this is not Shakespeare, but from a conflict standpoint, it is very Shakespearean. So if any of you are familiar with Shakespeare, this is a bit of a clinic in how to how to adapt something that is familial, that is charged with energy, charged with corruption, and that's succession. So I want to get into the ensemble because this is the most important part of the entire series. This is why we're tuning in any given day to see who's going to take someone else out or who's going to ally with someone else. And what makes the show so fantastic is that they're all family. So here's the Roy family, and excuse me if Logan's a little bit compressed. That's actually in Google Sheets if that happens. And we're going to break down each one of these characters. Starting with Logan. Logan is I'm sorry. So before you hop into anything, I'll tell you the relationships here. So Kendall is Logan's second oldest son. Connor in the top left is Logan's oldest son from his first marriage. Shiv is his daughter. That's Kendall's sister, Connor's half sister. Tom is Shiv's husband, who works for the company. Roman is the third oldest brother. That's Kendall and Shiv's brother. And then Greg is the cousin. So Greg is Logan's great nephew, or however you want to frame that. Logan is Greg's great uncle. So Greg's grandfather is Logan's brother, and they're estranged. And his name is Roger, and that's a very key point in the series moving forward. So this is sort of the family tree of players that we're dealing with here. But I want to hop into the characters here. But first, I want to look at the family. Okay, so the ensemble family, and you'll notice this in the pilot. These are the sort of clever things that elevate pilots. These are the things that make scripts sell and get made into hit series. This is a very nuanced thing. So in the script, you'll see that each member of the family ensemble is represented by the holdings of the Royco portfolio. In fact, each kid over the course of the series, and it's introduced in the pilot, becomes a head or a piece of each of these different companies in the portfolio. So if you look directly from the script, these are the different holdings in the script. So I'll get there real quick. And now they don't directly apply to the characters' personalities themselves, but they do a little bit. And you start seeing the theme parks become a key piece of this. And listen, Royco has kind of a Disney, Roy Disney. It sort of has that multimedia conglomerate feel to it. So the theme parks become a huge piece of the series, and they're introduced in this. From the writing standpoint, that's why I think it's last. People always remember the first thing and the last thing that they see. In this case, it says, and finally, the theme park franchise. A moment later, we meet Greg in the script. This is actually on page 6 of the script, is where this is pulled from. You meet Greg in this exact same moment. So it becomes obvious that theme parks are a integral piece to this family company. Further on, the other players the children will jockey for control of these theme parks. This is where the family circus theme comes in. Again, theme park. It's a bit of a comedic but serious jockey for power. So in your own writing, I think it's important to think about how you can use the plot and the other elements of the story to help inform who those characters are. And if you go through this, you may see Shiv, who's a kind of a ladder climbing politician, has aspirations of running for office. She is very news focused. She's sort of very current event focused. Roman, on the other hand, is very movie focused. He's very movie studio focused. He's very theatrical in the way he acts, the way he is. He's very fast talking, and we'll talk about him as we get to him. But you start to see these different subsidiaries of Royco, each embodied, they're almost personified by the characters themselves. Logan, being the patriarch of the family, has acquired all of these companies throughout his tenure. He's also given birth to a couple of children, all of whom are now in charge or will be in charge of a lot of these subsidiaries. Okay. So next I want to talk about Logan, because Logan's a very interesting character. As I said, he's the patriarch of the family. you'll see here I have a quote that is, "You either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain." That's from The Dark Knight, not from Succession, obviously, but it does apply, I think, to Logan, because you'll see in the pilot that Logan kind of seems like the ultimate bad guy. There's not a whole lot going for him. He's a villain. But what you end up really seeing is, and this is part of the, I think, script breakdown process, is that everything Logan's doing is because he loves his children. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with power. I think it has to do with love for family and his own loneliness. And we're going to talk about that as we go. So we first meet Logan in this demented state, but he seems to be all there for now. In true Logan fashion, though, he's never really what he seems. So let me see here. I'm sorry, where are we? So a few key things about Logan, and on page 22, and I'll get there in a second, you'll see this. I believe you can go back also after this webinar and reference this. So on page 22, you'll see what I mean. He's a man who doesn't know everything, but he is surprised by nothing. That speaks to his level of preparedness. He is someone who anticipates every move, and this is both personally and professionally. This is represented by a surprise party that his wife is attempting to throw for him. You can't keep anything a secret from him. We'll talk about teeing up and paying off in a moment and how that sort of plays out. But Logan is the kind of character that feels like his loss of control is what starts this merry-go-round of conflict and dysfunction in the pilot, and then trickles throughout the season. So we'll see that everything he wants, everyone wants something from him, and this is his identity, it's his value. And this goes directly back to what I was saying earlier. He's not a villain. He's both a hero and a villain, because his identity is derived from his own children. And in the pilot, in the middle part of the pilot, in the second act, you start to see at his birthday party, everyone that comes to him, including cousin Greg, shows up because they want something from him. When he asks how they're doing, they'd immediately talk about work, and that pulls itself right back in to the theme of the blurring the lines between family and company. It's all one and the same for a lot of them. So what's interesting about Logan is if you look at Logan as a lead character and you look at Kendall as a lead character, both of them are going through identity crises. Both of them are trying to figure out who they are in this current stage of life. I'm just going to close the chat real quick. And that's why I call him the ultimate company man, because he started the company, he runs the company, and he uses it to control other people. But when he loses control, there are massive consequences for those involved. So Kendall is the only child who's still working for him in the pilot. He pushes for this Kendall's pushing Logan in the pilot for this public announcement that he will be taking over for Logan as CEO. Now Logan sees his value beginning to shift. He's retiring. He's 80. His wife is 20 years his junior, and she's looking forward, I think, to the next 20 years of their lives. Logan realizes that if he leaves, that no one will want anything from him. Therefore, they will not come see him anymore. He will lose his family when he loses his company. Like I said, blurring that line between family and company. So on page 22, let me make sure that this is, make sure you have the right slide here. So on page 22, this surprised by nothing is not something that is single to him. You'll see it in Shiv, as we talk about later on, but he uses this this surprised by nothing throughout the script. And I want to highlight a few areas as it progresses to show you how he plans for everything and how to set something up and how to pay it off as it pertains to Logan. So he knows about the surprise party. This happens on page like 15 or around that area, page 22 actually. He knows about the surprise party. He doesn't pretend that he doesn't, and he leaves. This is symbolic of this character note right here. He doesn't know everything, but he's surprised by nothing. Then, as Kendall in the opening scene is in this negotiation of his life, ego on the line, it's the first acquisition of his presumably new tenure as CEO of the company. Guess who shows up at the office? But Logan. He's not supposed to be there. He's supposed to be at home. getting ready for this party, and he presents Kendall with a piece of paper. And this deal is to, as I discussed in the beginning, is to sign his wife into the family trust. Kendall's very stressed because of the negotiations currently happening. Logan knows this, and Kendall asks him, do I need to lawyer this deal? Do I need to have a lawyer look at this deal? Logan says no, it's just simple stuff. Don't worry about it. So Kendall just signs it. The entire episode, Logan is surprising people in this way. And we'll read this excerpt, but in the middle of the script, when he drops the bomb on all of his kids at his birthday party, that he is not stepping down as CEO, and in fact, he intends to be CEO for another 10 years, he surprises them. He's always surprising someone else, except for in the very, very end, when the kids tell him that they're not going to sign his trust agreement, the one that Kendall was duped into signing, and that lack of foresight actually causes a stroke in the character. So you see the one time in this episode where he is surprised, it is such a jolt that a vein literally bursts in his head. So if you look at your own writing that way, I think it's important to think, where can I tee up something about a character? Where can I inform that tee up as the script goes? That's what we call sort of laying breadcrumbs. And then how can I use that tee up at the beginning to pay off in a major cliffhanger way? Because Logan Roy doesn't die. So this is something that is great character creation in a pilot episode, because it shows us something about a man or in this case, Logan, very subtly without being on the nose. It'd be easy for someone to say to him, Dad, you're never surprised by anything. We can't, but they don't do that. They hint at it, and then they slowly unpack the fact that he's prepared for everything except for the one thing that he thought was in the bag, and that's his own family following his will. Okay? So the last thing about Logan before we move on to the next character is that he presents more questions in the pilot than answers. He is a character who every time he does something, we find ourselves as a reader asking, why is he doing that? Or what caused him to do that? He seems reactive in the pilot, and I'll argue that he's actually the most active character in the entire pilot. Okay, so next I want to move on to Kendall, because Kendall is a very interesting character as well. He is what I deem to be the sort of second lead or main character in a two-hander in the pilot with Logan. So he seems to be this highly complex, contradictory character in the midst of a major identity crisis. 2 years earlier, Kendall was in rehab. Kendall seems to be the proverbial sort of screw up, but for whatever reason, he's the one that has stayed with the company. All the other kids have either blazed their own trails, left the family behind, or done something else at the current stage that we're looking at. Kendall is very indecisive. He's very unsure of himself. He's very impulsive. The unique thing about Kendall, and when you read the pilot, you'll see he runs on emotion. He's very meek at times. Then he turns into a fiery, tempery rage. Because of that, and that's sort of a result of running on emotion, he's always reactionary. He's rarely proactive or active. Every time there's a decision to be made, he has to ask another character their opinion. Because of this, and he knows as a character, this is where his identity sort of struggles. He's a recovering drug addict. As I said, he is divorced. He needs reassurance with every decision. And he is us. And this is something I didn't realize about the show until I read the pilot, is that Kendall is us. Because I'm not cut out for this world that these people live in, and I don't think many of us are. He's not an engineered character. He's multidimensional. Some characters that exist in TV and features, and books, and all of those things are one-dimensional. They exist solely to prop up or reveal something about the multidimensional characters. Kendall is the uber multidimensional character, and he's not idealized in the least. If you look at shows like Billions on Showtime, Bobby Axelrod has his flaws, but he's an idealized version of a hedge fund manager. If you look at Harvey Specter in the USA show Suits, he is also an idealized version of a corporate attorney. He's near flawless. Kendall's the complete opposite of that. Even when Kendall succeeds, he does something wrong. There's a mistake, and that's us. he is the character I think we as the viewer most identify with. Now, I want to go back to something quickly on that note. So bear with me one second. I want to go back to the opening image. So if you look at this image, you see a table cracked. You see everyone sitting around the dinner table. You see Logan right here. One second. I'm sorry. You see, not Logan. You see Kendall to the right, front right. You see his brother Roman next to him on the right, looking at him. You see Greg looking across the table at Connor, who's looking at him. Most people are looking at Kendall, but who's looking at us? And that's Logan. Partly that's marketing to get it to make us feel like we're at the table, but I do think that also speaks to us being Kendall as the viewer. So that's something when you're reading through, think of it that way. Frame your read through that lens. Okay, I'm going to go back to our character here. His archetype is the hero or anti-hero, I think. He's not heroic. Not many of these characters are likable in the show. They're all have egos the size of a hot air balloon, but we do feel bad for some of these characters. And as I said, he's the only one that's left, and he always seems to be behind the 8 ball in everything he does. That's also a drug reference, because I think he went to rehab for that. But the point is that he's always reacting to someone hitting him. Then I want to talk about Cousin Greg, okay? I put Cousin Greg third because I think Cousin Greg is also one of the more interesting characters of the show. And there's a reason for that. So he's in his 20s. As I said, we meet him when he is stoned out of his mind, working at a Roy family theme park, like Disney World. And he vomits out of his cartoon character suit. And there's something about Greg that evolves in the pilot. When he shows up at Logan's birthday party, Greg is mysterious. He's unknown. He's a bumbling, stumbling idiot. As I say, on the surface, he's innocent, he's naive, and he's ignorant. No one thinks anything of him. Cousin Greg asks his great uncle, the CEO of this company, for help, being reinstated in the company and on a management track. Everyone blows him off, even Logan, until Greg, as a Trojan horse, reanalyzes his situation and still in his Cousin Greg sort of way shows us that he is scheming and that he is selfish, maybe the most in the entire series. I call it, from an archetype standpoint, he's the child, because children are innocent, they're naive, they don't know any better, but they're also very manipulative, they're also very selfish, if not the most selfish beings in the world, and that's common knowledge. And what's interesting about Cousin Greg is that he represents Logan Roy's true familial parallel. He is a young Logan Roy. He grew up not wealthy. Logan Roy did not grow up wealthy. Logan Roy has what it takes to turn on family, to turn on everyone else in his life. Cousin Greg is the same way, and this is exhibited on page 54. So if you go to 54, and I'll read it to you because it's not actually in the presentation. Here. So at this point, they're all about to get on these helicopters to go fly and play baseball. Greg has made his intentions clear that he wants to be part of the family business. He doesn't really have anything to offer at this point. So the Royco board is comprised of all the kids and Logan's brother, Greg's grandfather, Roger, and Marcia, who is Logan's wife. The conflict in this episode, aside from Kendall having to step down as soon-to-be CEO, is Logan wants to give Marcia his proxy vote when he passes away. Greg, after being shut down by the family members in saying, I want to be part of this, has the opportunity to ride to the helicopters with Logan himself in the car. And what he does is he says, in the typical Cousin Greg way, he says, I'll read you the line. On page 53, he goes, Greg says to Logan, but it occurred to me, having him on the trust, meaning his grandfather, that must be suboptimal in some ways. Nothing from Logan. Greg then continues, because of history, still a poker face from Logan. Logan is anticipating this, and he's not revealing anything. Then Greg says, but if I could, if he was willing to give his seat to someone more, and he uses a $1 million word, someone you could deal with, who could learn the ropes running theme parks. Would that be maybe a win-win? Logan questions him, and then Greg says, I mean, you scratch my back. I wouldn't say I could scratch yours. It's too considerable, but you scratch my back. Not suck your butt. Is there an angle there, perhaps? Logan thinks, and they ride in silence. So at this page, 3/4 of the way through the pilot, Greg has made a major move in the family. The other kids at this point are still trying to figure out how to run damage control on just standing up to their father. They have the legal right to say no to him. They have Kendall has already signed over the right for Marcia to be a double vote on the board, but Greg doesn't have a vote on the board. Greg is a fired theme park worker who has realized that if I play into my grandfather and my great uncle's feud, that I can actually gain power and kick my own family off the board, meaning his own grandfather. This is a very conniving, scheming move that Greg does, and he does it all in this Trojan horse method. So let me see where we are here. So in this sense, we meet him in a costume and not as a character. This is an example, I think, in your own writing that you can use. Greg is wearing an external suit that's hiding who he actually is as a character. We meet him in this position where he is this bumbling, stumbling cartoon character, and we meet him in a moment of complete physical comedy. The vomit, the kids beating him up, all these different things. But what Greg leads to is Logan's own mirrored image. So when you're reading this pilot, when you're writing your own thing, ironically, you'll see, I call him the child archetype. Cousin Greg is the most similar to Logan, and he is the only non-biological child that's really jockeying for power throughout the series. He understands the role of power in the family. He understands kissing the ring, and he understands stabbing family in the back. It's introduced in the pilot. It does not pay out for a while. Okay, so next I want to move on to Roman. Okay, Roman's a highly entertaining character. I call him the jester archetype. He is capable, he's tragic, he's duplicitous. There are a few moments of, and this is again something else you can use in your own writing, a few moments where you're not quite sure what's happening with Roman. Okay, you don't quite know what he wants, you don't know why he's there. He's a bit of a mystery. But the one thing about Roman that you do see is that his reputation does precede him. When we first meet him on page 19, is right in the middle of Kendall's negotiation. And when Roman shows up, it's not Roman that shows up. It's his business alchemist who is lighting incense. So in the same way that Roman commands attention in a room with his fast talking and bad language and loud voice, in the same way we smell incense the moment it enters a room. That's Roman. You know he's there, and everyone knows it. In your own writing, think about using characters like this. We don't meet Roman first. We introduce the kind of character he is on page 19 before he actually shows up. So he's infectious as a character. You'll see, where are we here? So actually, I'm going to bump that down to in the future. So there's something to focus on with Roman, and throughout the pilot, news is constantly being leaked. These are heads of corporations. They're presumably Fortune 500 company CEOs and part of that family. The press is constantly in existence. It becomes a huge tool for Kendall as the pilot begins to wrap up. But when Logan breaks the news to his whole family, that's Shiv, that's Kendall, that's Roman, that is Connor, that he's not going to step down as CEO, he steps out of the room and Roman immediately starts to text. There's an interesting moment where Kendall tells him, put your phone down, stop texting. Roman says, that's private. I'm just talking to my lawyer trying to figure out what I need to do. Something Kendall didn't do in the opening sort of meeting between he and Logan when he trusted his dad and he signed the document. What is not stated but hinted at as this pilot progresses, is that everybody is giving information to people that shouldn't have it, except for Kendall until he does. So there's a character named Lawrence who is bidding against the family for this company. He is sort of the villain that's teed up at the beginning, and we'll talk about this in a second, but he always seems to be one step ahead from an info standpoint on Kendall. When Kendall shows back up, the first words out of Lawrence's mouth are, "So I hear your dad's, I hear you didn't make the cut," or something along those lines. He always seems to know that the family is fracturing before anyone else does in the pilot. Presumably, that's Roman. Presumably, it's someone else. We don't know the answer to that, but good writing creates that suspense or that mystery to be unpacked later on. So you'll see in this scene, I think on page 45 is where it is, that Roman might be a leak. The unique thing about this is that Greg is also on the phone at random times, and you don't hear what he's saying in the background. All these characters sort of seem to be maneuvering themselves, except for Kendall. The kicker in this script, in this pilot, is that after this family baseball game, Kendall finally realizes that he has to make a move on his father. So as he's walking away, as I said in my sort of opening synopsis, as he's walking back to the helicopter, he calls someone in the press and says, from a source close to the Roy family, Logan's stepping down. He's losing his mind. He's a little slower than he once was, and Kendall is in fact taking over. So he's planting a story. What's interesting here is that everyone has been one step ahead of him the entire time. So when you're reading the pilot, look at those moments when the other characters are ahead of Kendall. Lawrence is the character that does that. Whenever he appears, there's an info dump that has meaning. It goes back to what I said at the very, very beginning, that there is a reason for everything in the script. Okay, so I want to move on to Shiv, because Shiv is not a major role, nor is Connor in the pilot. She exists. She's very capable. She's very savvy and cunning. She's dishonest, but she's very likable. She truly understands leverage and power and her own value. She always seems to be the kid, or the adult child that knows exactly what's happening at any given moment. She is also very closely aligned to her father, and we'll talk about that in a second. So her obsession with power is manifested through her husband, Tom, okay? Tom is someone who, when we first meet them, they're shopping for a gift for her father. Tom is looking at a multi-$1,000 wristwatch. Shiv knows that her father, Logan, does not like gifts, especially extravagant gifts. Tom is racking his brain. He works for the company, so it's a little political too. He's racking his brain to find a gift for his father-in-law. Shiv does not tell him that Logan does not like extravagant gifts. There's something to be said here about she doesn't want to ever be in a position where someone gains more favor than she does with her father. In the sense, if she had helped her husband, Tom, pick out the right gift, whatever it might be, sentimental, then there's a risk of him gaining more favor than she does in her father's eyes. It's a very political move, something that's very subtle in the script. This also pays off later on when she gives him, her father, a very sentimental gift, which is sort of this coffee table book of all of the houses that they lived in over the years. The complete opposite of the gift that Tom gives Logan. When Tom gives Logan the gift, Logan sort of, in a passive-aggressive way, shuffs it off. Tom's an interesting character because he represents artificiality. I know I skipped Connor. We'll go back to him. Artificiality in the sense that he is our understanding as society's view of this multi-billionaire character. You think he likes extravagant things. You think, which he does. Tom is on the outside. He is the actual outsider archetype. I put TBD because Tom doesn't have a massive presence in the pilot. He's there and he has his own key things, but it's more so, I think, to show us what Shiv is like as a character. This also comes into play at dinner time. After Logan has broken the news, Kendall does not go back to the boardroom, and they're all sitting around the table, and Tom is just merrily smiling by. The actual line is, Tom smiles at Kendall. Tom has no idea that Kendall has just been stabbed in the back by his own father. He is on the outside of the family, despite being married into the family. Even cousin Greg has more access than Tom at this point. So to go back, lastly, there's Connor. He's the oldest. He's from Logan's first marriage. He understands the inner workings of the family and just how fractured they are. He has left the family and he works on a farm, kind of in the middle of nowhere. The gift he gives his father is sourdough starter. Kind of gives you an idea of who Connor is. But he does represent in the pilot, I think, the gravitational pull that the power has on this family. So while he says that he wants nothing to do with signing this deal for Marcia, while he says that he'll do whatever his siblings want to do, he sort of claims to hide, he hides behind experience. I've already seen the good and the bad of this family. I'll just go along with the flow. We know for a fact that that's going to start to unravel as the season progresses. So I want to speed up here. Let me see where we are. We got Tom. So I want to go to character relationships. This is another key part of everything, because in an ensemble, you just don't have a bunch of characters that exist on their own. You have characters that interact with other characters, and that's how we learn information. So first, I want to talk about the viewer and the family. So Lawrence is this character that I just mentioned. He's the other buyer who's trying to acquire the company that Kendall is fighting against in the beginning. And he tells us everything we need to know about our family, our company in the beginning, and how the public views the family, but more specifically Kendall, how we should view them. We at this point have no reason to think Kendall is anything but an industry of, or a titan of industry. But Lawrence on page 8 says to him, they're walking side by side, and Lawrence says, I'm not letting you very quietly, I'm not letting you heathens into rate my company. Kendall says, excuse me. Lawrence says, you think you can even shit straight without daddy around to steady the pot? Kendall looks around, can't quite believe what he's hearing, but he recovers his composure. Well, I guess we'll see. And then Lawrence says, you're nobody who's done nothing but coke. There is no reason why this character Lawrence should tell us about heathens raping companies, except for the fact that this is a company of people that we shouldn't trust. Lawrence feels like the villain, but I think he's a false villain. I think that he is the MacGuffin. He is what causes us to shift our focus. That Kendall might not be a good guy. Logan might not be a good guy. Shiv might not be a great woman. That's further exhibited, and this might be a stretch, on page 52. So after Logan has pulled the plug on things, after he sort of forced them to sign over his seat to Marcia on the board, they all go into the bathroom and they fight it out like siblings do, trying to figure out what's happening. They then Kendall starts to badmouth Marcia about money grubbing and all of these things. You'll see that. And then there's a soft knock at the door, and Marcia off screen says, guys, ouch. They all make faces. Did she hear that they were talking about her aggressively behind her back? They open the door. She looks all sweetness and light. I interpreted that simple line as they immediately think that she's money grubbing, power hungry, after their family for their money. They open that door, and what they see is just a nice, sweet woman. There's something interesting about Marcia, and you'll have to continue to watch the show to sort of see how that all plays out. But from the Roy family standpoint, they're quick to think the worst about someone rather than the better of them. Okay. The next thing about relationships here is something that we need to look at between Logan and Kendall. As I said, the two main characters of our story. Okay. 1 second. So in the midst of this opening deal, this investment banker asks Kendall if he wants to talk to his dad. Kendall is indecisive at this point, and he's trying to figure out what move he should make. The number is 120 million. There's a counter on the table. Kendall reacts with hostility towards everyone. What he says is this. Alessandro is the investment banker. He says, and we don't want to just bump another point, blah, blah, blah. Frank, that's the COO. It's your call. Alessandro sees a moment of indecision. Alessandro, you want to call your dad? Kendall looks like someone's punched him in the nuts, but he refuses to react. Kendall, do I want to call my dad? No, I don't want to call my dad. Do you want to call your dad? Is that a real question? From the length of time it hangs, eventually yes. No. Does anyone want to call their dad? Silence. So clearly Kendall's going through an identity crisis. And what that leads to is hostility in a scene that's about to come. So They say, okay, fine, Kendall, we're not going to call your dad. Sorry, we said it. They all go into the room, and then Kendall's phone rings. And who is it? It's his father. So Kendall now has to decide if he's actually going to speak with his father. Sorry, it got cut off. But so he looks at the phone, it rings, and then he picks it up and says hello. What then happens is Logan cannot make a decision without someone to talk to, especially his father. And you see on this page, I believe it's page 10, they have a conversation about Logan interjecting himself into the negotiation. But then Kendall pivots, and this is where it all starts to change for the family. Kendall asks if we're still good for tomorrow, today. He's talking about the press release announcing him as CEO and Logan stepping down. This is a perfect example of using, in your own writing, using clues and hints before actually showing us the whole reasoning for it. So for pages, Marcia and Logan, Kendall and Logan, they're talking about this press release or this announcement. We don't know what that is until we finally get our eye full and we know what it is. So this is a way, again, as I say, of laying breadcrumbs to then find the gingerbread house. That's the press release. It creates this pacing, this sense of wanting to know what's about to happen that, that is very sophisticated writing. So next, what comes up is on page 12, Kendall introduces conflict to come by, sorry, this is what I just said. Logan doesn't show his hand to his own son. But then Kendall's character shifts when he goes back into the room. Logan has just told Kendall, yes, it's coming today, tomorrow. He deceives his son because we know what happens because we just talked about it. Kendall's character shifts into writing on emotion at this point. When he goes back into the room, getting the news that he wanted from his father, his strategy has shifted to brashness. So he says, Kendall just goes right in and says, we're able to go to 125.2, but all cash. Management, so that's Lawrence's company, or the Lawrence's party. Lawrence says 60% cash, 40% stock. Kendall says, oh, okay, that's speed of anticipation. That's just worse, I guess. There's chuckles all around. Kendall's overstepping the mark, but it's roguish. It's quite appealing. He's the opposite of the meek Kendall that we saw a few minutes ago. What causes the shift in the character is the conversation with Logan. Kendall says, I mean, in layman's terms, sorry to verbalize. So what we see then is Logan shows up to see Kendall. Moments later, after that phone call, Logan has realized that his family is being taken away from him by a member of its own. And again, family and company are one and the same. So on page 23 and 42, the family trust is anything but trust. This is when Logan shows up. Kendall refuses the lawyer because he trusts his father. On page 42, when it's revealed that he actually signed he signed an agreement to Marcia having more power than he does. Logan tells him, there's a reason why you're not getting this company. It's a series of mistakes, one being you didn't lawyer up when I made a move on you. This is family. This is father and son, and it doesn't seem like a healthy relationship. At the same time, in that moment on page 42, all of the family members, Roman, Shiv, they're all talking to their lawyers. They're independent lawyers about this trust deal. So trust is something that we'll see emerge, or lack thereof, emerge in the pilot and emerge in the series. So keep your eyes on it. He says, Dad, I'm busy. Do I need to lawyer this? Logan lies. No, it's housekeeping. Well, he massages the truth. Logan signs it. Where this pays off is on page 42. Logan tells Kendall, Kendall's already signed up. But Logan tells the other kids, Kendall's already signed up, but if I can get all of you to ... So he's using his own son as leverage to get something done. Logan then puts a clock on the deal with his own family, and he says, sure, take a beat. By 4 p.m., that's fine. He is negotiating with his own family. Logan has anticipated all of these moves. That's why when his kids at the end of the pilot tell him, no, Dad, we're not going to sign this, at least not right now. We're going to negotiate back with you. He has a stroke. So I'm going to pick it up a little bit so we can get the question, but it's a very dense pilot, so I want to make sure we cover everything. So next up is on page 46, when confronted, Logan leans into, and this is the same scene, Logan leans into trash talk tactic as Lawrence did with Kendall, only to see that Kendall backs down a second time. in this scene, how it's proceeded, Logan tells Kendall, you don't have the spine for the job that I have. That's one of the many reasons why you're not currently taking over. What he then does is he mimics Lawrence that we saw earlier in the scene and begins to trash talk Kendall, and Kendall backs down. He's not able to stand up to his own father. He doesn't have the stones that someone like Greg might have. Page 48, again, you never lawyered up. Page 48 also, it's a culmination. You left the room. Kendall left the negotiating table to go to his father's birthday party, a manipulation that Logan set up when he showed up at the office earlier in the episode to make him sign the agreement. So I want to speed through this bit. So on page 62, and these are all things that you can see in the pilot when you read it, but you look at the setup and the payoff of everything. Even after all of this, Kendall not only stays with Logan the entire day, but asks his permission to leave. This is at the family baseball game. The deal is blowing up. Kendall has to get back, and he still says, Dad, do you mind? I have to get back to the office. Logan says, by all means, go back. After all of this, Kendall still can't bring himself to just say, I'm leaving, bye. On his way to the helicopter, that's when he calls the press. On 64, this is the fatal blow. He leaks the news about Logan's slowing down, but the question is, who is the fatal blow to, himself or Logan or the company? In subsequent episodes, we'll see the stock price plummet as a result of this move. So I want to look at Logan and Shiv quickly. So like her father, Shiv's surprised by nothing, meaning she's able to anticipate everything. You see this on page 44, where they're all in the room at dinner. Logan tells his kids, Ken's not taking over, I'm staying on. Kendall loses his mind. Roman's laughing. Kendall says, well, I don't know what you're fucking laughing about, Roman. Roman says, I'm not even laughing. What? He's the Joker. This is how he is. Kendall says, this is going to be a shitstorm. He's going to have to blow the firm's credibility. Did he look okay to you? Shiv says, oh, come on, Ken. This is typical. What we think is Shiv has anticipated this move. Shiv knew that her father wouldn't step down. But you can look at this from another perspective, and this is something I encourage you all to try to do, and this pilot is full of it. Her lack of surprise might actually be in reference of Kendall and not of Logan. This is typical Kendall. This is what you typically do. You mess things up. This is your identity struggle, okay? There's another moment, too, where Shiv sort of understands her lack of surprise. You see over here. Oh yeah, so last line there, right at the bottom right, goes to Kendall, it's just dad, like being dad. Like we know this is gonna happen. Okay, so next I want to talk about Logan and Shiv. She knows her value. On page 58, she's not coming back unless it's for the top job, either over the company or over her husband, Tom. At this point, we're all traveling to play baseball, and Kendall is not becoming CEO, at least not right now, and Logan has gone to each of the kids and said, I want you back at the company. He's gone to Roman. We'll talk about that in a second. Same thing. I want you back inside, Roman. Won't you come back and work for us? Shiv, same thing. So he asked Shiv what she wants, and she says, I want the top slot. And he says, it's more difficult than that. So then he says, what about overseeing all the theme parks overseas? And that's something that she would be Tom's boss. And you'll see right here, she goes, well, Logan, and if that was difficult, Shiv, I don't know. Logan, overseeing everything outside the U.S., parks and all. Shiv says, what, Tom's boss? That's her husband. Logan says, yeah. She smiles, maybe. So this, again, is she's power hungry, but only in certain doses. It's something to keep your eye on Shiv, because as the series progresses, she becomes maybe the most power hungry of all the characters. So next there's Logan and Roman. Roman is the jester character. He's very fun. He's very bad-mouthed or trash-mouthed. On page 35, same thing. Logan asks Roman, won't you return back to the inside? And Roman shuts him down. We ask ourselves, is this a response to Logan's question? I'm sorry, is the response to Logan's question genuine, or is it disingenuous? So see right here, he says, so what are you thinking, son? Roman raises his eyebrows. On the thing, meaning the Marcia thing, Roman looks over at Marcia. Logan, she's really smart. She'd make good picks. Family first. That's business first. Roman says, oh, sure, I'm sure. He's pandering his own father. Logan says, so? Roman says, so, well, I guess I want to do anything for you. Logan says, well, thank you, knowing it's disingenuous. Roman says, but Logan anticipates it, but where's your cut? Roman, no, God, no. It's your firm, Dad, meaning you want to take over. I cut a bit out because it's exposition. Roman, well, what's in it for me? What is in it for me? Like, just out of curiosity. Logan says, oh, sure, everything's a deal, son, because I would love to get you back in. Roman, sure. And then so on and so forth. Roman turns his father down. On page 56, he doubles down on this. And Roman says to him, look, I want to run, this is in a helicopter. Look, I want to run the show, but till then, chief operating officer. But I guess that's Frank. Logan says, uh-huh. What ends up happening in the episode is that at the baseball game, Frank gives a very, very heartfelt speech about Logan. Logan then, in the preceding minutes, fires Frank. He gives him a golden parachute. This is a man that's been with his company for 30 plus years. He's the COO. He is Logan's right-hand man, and he's fired. And Logan is going to put Roman in this role. He's going to offer Shiv a role in this company. Kendall is in this company. This is a perfect example of what I said. You think that Logan's he's acting and reacting to the moves that characters are making throughout the episode, and what he's doing is he's keeping his family together. In his mind, if he's the head of the family, they all need something from him, and he has value. The moment he steps away from this company is the moment he has lost his kids forever. Kendall is the one kid, it seems, that he doesn't mind losing, and that's because he's never lost. That's not for sure. That's me interpreting this, but it's a very interesting mindset for this character Logan to be in. So lastly, I want to talk about the Logan and his kid relationship. You have Logan and you have his kids. So affection is perceived to be bought by the kids. Business is the true identity. As I said, whenever he asks, how are you doing? They always talk about business, not how they're actually doing. Logan does yearn for closeness from his children, I think, but they've all been pushed away. And that's a question of why. In the pilot, you'll see these things sort of pop up. Why hasn't Kendall fled with the others? There's a reason for that as well. Maybe this is the reason why he should actually be running the company in the first place. And is Logan's biggest fear that his kids will stop needing him if he retires? Now, this is something that's not obvious in the least in the pilot, but it's how you look at breaking it down. So we'll fly through it quickly here. I want to talk about the dramatic structure. If you look at the pilot, this is how pilots should start. Breaking Bad starts with Walter White in his underwear and a gas mask in an old busted Winnebago, cruising through the desert, crashing, cops driving right by. There's a dead body in the back, sloshing around with broken, chemistry equipment. It's visceral. That's how this opening is. We're in a room. It's night. It's black. There's an unsteady POV of someone groping through the darkened room, hands out ahead. Bang, there's a wall. Logan, where am I? He's confused. Where the fuck am I? Okay, there's an opening figure that we see. Marcia, we introduce her. And then what happens? Boom, the light's on. And listen to how this is phrased. Dark urine stutters across the deep white pile of thick carpet, dampening it down like hot piss on wet snow. That is such a descriptive, such a visceral description of what's happening here. We know this man is confused. We know he's older. We know that he's probably wealthy based on the snow-like thickness of his carpet, and it is the kind of opening that pulls us in. So it's vivid, it's provocative, it establishes the voice of the series. I think that the first 2 pages of any pilot is a make or break moment. It creates a level of suspense. We don't know who this man is. We don't know what's wrong with him, but we do presume that he's wealthy. So when you read the script, read the opening scene, opening page 2 or 3 times, and think about how your own writing can open with that bam and end with that bam, because everyone remembers the opening scene of Breaking Bad. Everyone remembers the ending scene of Breaking Bad, and these are things that really matter. So now I want to talk about, that's the opening. Yeah, I talked about this. Lastly, I want to talk about the cause and effect in the episode, or in the series, but specifically the episode. So Succession is a script writing lesson in cause and effect, action and reaction. What's very interesting is you find yourself asking yourself as you read, Most of Logan's actions are consequences to the actions of those around him. Kendall asks for the press release to go out. Logan reacts. He puts his plan into motion to revoke the CEO-ship, to give Marcia another vote, and the consequences of Logan's reaction sparks action against Logan, meaning Kendall goes to the press. The question we ask ourselves here, is Logan reacting or is he acting? Did he, from the very beginning, know that this was what was going to happen? This goes back into the man is surprised by nothing. The only genuine thing that I believe that Logan doesn't know in this pilot is that his kids will not behave. They will not do what he says, something that they have always done because they need his money. So if you look at the whole pilot and then again the whole series, it's a series of actions and consequences, reactions and consequences, reactions and consequences. Logan is putting these things into play on purpose, I believe. I think he knows that Kendall is going to go to the press. I think he knows all of these things. And what we're seeing is the fallout from how his kids react to Logan's action. So I believe that while it looks like he's the most reactive character in the script, he's actually the most proactive in the script. That's just something that we don't see as readers. It's not on the page. It's layered into the story. Okay, another example of this is that Kendall's actions are driven by his emotion. All of his actions have consequences, usually outside of his control. This is, again, a cause and effect structure that sets the stage for change. In a pilot, you begin the character arcs to give them somewhere to go, somewhere to change. Presumably, Kendall, the everyman, us, is going to change as this series goes on. He's going to learn from his mistakes because he's making mistakes. Very rarely do main characters not learn from the mistakes they make. That's not realistic. So through this cause and effect structure, you can introduce action, you can unpack the consequences of that action, and you can set the stage for how that character can change through that moment. Okay? So I'll pound through the last few things. So conflict stacking is something to keep your eye for. It's when a writer will, and this is not an official term, it's something that I sort of use terminology-wise to signify a type of boxing in of a character. When it rains, it pours is a better way of remembering that. Kendall gets bad news and then bad news and then bad news and then bad news all at the same time. He not only has to dig himself out of one hole, he has to dig himself out of 4 holes at one time. And that character has to decide if he's going to pick one, both, all 3, how his, this character stacking method of creating conflict, it highlights the character's internal struggle because it makes them make decisions. It makes them act and react. It shows their flaws and their strengths based on how they respond. So an example of this is Kendall's hit by a whirlwind of conflict in the middle of the pilot, tricked by his father to sign Marcia in. He leads the negotiation and he doesn't take over the company. There's more to it than that, but you'll have to read the pilot and find out. So the last thing I'll sort of talk about here is the idea that big problems exist in a little world. So this conflict is very micro. This is a very small stakes conflict. There's not life and death, for the most part, life and death circumstances, but it feels macro for characters. This is the same way that, say, like young adult movies in high school are big problems in a little world. These are not life-threatening problems, but they're corporate problems. And there's something interesting to see how characters destroy relationships that are lifelong relationships over small wins. So an example of this is Kendall's shocked to lose the top spot, but for the others, that move is met by humor. Roman, he makes fun of it, and Shiv, she's not surprised. So it's just every time that something happens in this script, it's framed in a different way based on what character's perspective you're looking for. So lastly, I want to talk about how the pilot ends. It ends with a bang. Okay, Kendall's betrayed his father. He's leaked the news to the press. Logan has suffered a stroke and he's in a coma. Frank, the COO, who I didn't talk a lot about today, has been fired for the sole reason that Logan wants and needs to keep his kids back under his control. And lastly, the bumbling, stumbling cousin Greg has made the only real move of consequence. And that leads us into the next chapter of the of the series, episode 2. And I do think that all of you should tune in to check it out. And if you haven't seen the whole of the season 3, I recommend doing it, but at least watch the first season and see how it plays out. So that is it for Succession. But I do want to change tactics quickly and show you my script. So this is what my script looks like when I broke it down. Okay, when I'm really digging into a script, to read it from a development standpoint, this is what it looks like. These are sticky notes. I scan this in. So as I'm writing, I put the themes and the story engines that I see at the top on the title page. You see a story about a successful family being a failing family, essentially, these different things. As I progress, you'll see I start to make notes about things. I highlight characters. I highlight pertinent things that are applicable or that might pay off later. If I catch something that's paid off later, I'll go back and highlight it on both ends. Every now and then I use different colors. So like a blue will be a different tee up payoff and vice versa. So as you go through, you start to see just the different notes that I make on this. We introduce Tom, we introduce Shiv. We have the establishment of Tom is a very quick info dump about things. Then you start getting into subtext. This script is full of subtext. It's what's actually going on in the scene. So you have things underlined, self-centered versus waste of time. So I'm just going to scroll through. You'll see here's the subsidiary representation of the kids. So I say here, parallel the variety of business with the families, the family circus, it's coming to town. So that's how I break down a script, and it changes. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. So I say here, these are not good people. This is the first outside opinion we have of this family is this. I'm not letting you heathens in to rape my company. So with that, I'll take questions because I don't want it to go too late. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Awesome. Wow. Will, that was amazing. that was awesome. I don't know about, right when we started, you said that it could go, that it's so intense, it could go 3 hours. Exactly what you mean. Why don't I'll give you a chance to get a sip of water because you have been going super fast, but
as I said, it would take 3 hours to really like dig into the, get all of the meat and potatoes out of the script. So
that is amazing, and the fact that it is so many layers of symbolism and so much to unpack there. And just for everyone, just in the chat, but I got some questions. You will get a copy of the script. That's going to be sent right after the webinar so that you can go back and with all of the pages and all the page numbers that Will gave you, you'll be able to reference that. That's going to be sent to the Stage 32 profile right after this. And well, there's a lot to unpack. One quick thing before we get to that, I'll give people some time to get their questions in the question box right there. So give us your questions. This is an amazing opportunity to ask Will one-on-one questions. And I have to say, Will, not only was your insight on breaking it down, but also just to see firsthand your sticky notes of how you actually break down scripts when you read them. I think that's so helpful for writers to see your actual process of how you, as someone who reads so many scripts and looks at films and projects for development, they actually, for us to see firsthand how our scripts are read, I think is so invaluable. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. And I will say that I find that it doesn't mean it's a bad script by any means, but when I'm breaking down something for development reasons, if it doesn't have a lot of setup, payoff, things like that, things that I am looking for, if that makes sense, it does tend to be a slightly more shallow script. And typically that's a pass. So this is a really good case study for writers, specifically TV writers, to think about how do I set up my characters? How do I give enough conflict for the reader to hang on, but then I don't reveal too much where I want them to then watch a second or read a second episode, and that's where the sales happen. Is too many pilots, I think, resolve things up front instead of posing questions. It's okay to pose questions as long as there's, like I said, a breadcrumb effect where those questions are sort of being propped up by events or character moves, things like that.
It's really helpful to see how scripts are read from your viewpoint, and those decisions that you make on if there are layers, if there's the symbolism and the subtext and all of the conflict stacking. I love your phrase of conflict stacking. I made a note for everyone. Something you said that I thought was really insightful was you said that dialogue on the page is your beachfront property.
Mm-hmm.
I love that phrase because it truly is that every single word has a reason to be there.
The fastest pass the quickest reasons, I guess, that I pass on certain things is that when you read a lot of scripts, and I have to read a lot for work, I have for years, you start to very quickly see when dialogue is written just to fill the page, and it takes you out immediately from the script. And I didn't talk about it, but even at the beginning, you'll see around page 4 or 5, Marcia and Logan have a conversation after he talks with Kendall, and there is a banter, no, not banter, but like let's go to visit this island sort of conversation that happens, and that conversation has meaning. And if you look at it, and I won't talk more about it, you should all read it, but every line in the script has a meaning. It actually does. And because of that, I mean, I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe it. And like, you can find deep double meaning in almost subtext and double meaning in almost every single scene in the script.
And that's what makes it groundbreaking with 25 Emmy nominations, the most ever.
Exactly.
In one season. I also wanted to really quickly let everyone know about the gift, the special gift that we said that we were going to give out to everyone who was here with us today. And I had just dropped this in the chat because you are here today with Will talking about Succession. We are offering a free month into the Stage 32 Writers Room, which is our exclusive private community of screenwriters and professionals. I think something that makes writing such a difficult endeavor is that it's solitary, even though filmmaking and television is a collaborative effort, it's a collaborative art, writing is so solitary. And I think that, if you have a community like Stage 32, in the writer's room, you can get feedback. You can, join these writing rooms. It's accountability, it's community that I think so often writers, we don't have. And I know you work in the writer's room as well.
I have. I've spoken to the writer's room. I've done Q&As in it and things like that. And there's a lot to be had, a lot of info and a lot of, I think, sort of brain trust that exists in those places. And there's a reason why they call it the writer's room on a TV show, is that's where writers break story. And people think that, you go off and you write your episode, but that was all created by a group of people that have different skill sets and different interests and different perspectives and knowledge and things like that. And I do think that the writer's room is a pretty beneficial place for anyone. I mean, not even just writers, but, producers or whomever else. So I think it's a great place to, it's a great offering first and foremost, but and I think that there are Q&As with other producers like myself and things like that. And I think we all give different perspectives. So
yeah, it's a great community. And so, like you said, you get to meet executives. There's these private writing lounges. You swap scripts. You can practice your log lines. And there's also these interactive webcasts like we're having now. We have those in the writer's room as well. And it's a great opportunity to find your community. I wanted to also just give pardon me, I've got a cough. A little shout out as well, because today at 4 o'clock, if you sign up before 4 p.m. Pacific, we have a literary manager there today talking about how you get a manager. What do you have to, what samples do you have, all that. And this literary manager actually found a client in the Stage 32 Writers Room that is now a show on Tubi. So, it's a great opportunity. So before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to give that information. Look in the chat, stage32.com/plan-VIP. If you have questions, let us know. So we have got a lot of questions for you. Okay, so first of all,
hopefully I can answer them.
I'm sure you can. So in your experience, Maria wants to know, in your experience when you write the pilot, do you already know the end of the series, or at least the end of that season when you finish writing the pilot?
It's a good question. You should, as the writer, know, and this actually, it seems fairly obvious, but then so many writers don't know the outcome of the season, let alone not the outcome, but even the subsequent episodes. So the answer is yes, you should know the outcome of that season. It might change, it might shift and be revised, but you should have a general idea of where those characters will be at the end of that season. As far as series, no, not so much. Most networks and buyers only sort of expect 3 seasons to kind of be somewhat fleshed out. First season, obviously, the most fleshed out. Second most, and so on and so forth. So to answer your question, yes, you should know what's happening every step of that way, because that's going to inform your pilot. Pilots that are disjointed are typically written without any idea of what's going to happen next. They're almost written like 60-page feature films rather than, a reverse engineering of the season. So I would actually recommend for writers in the planning phase to actually build out the 10 episode arc or whatever it is, starting with like the last one, like the actual conclusion, and working your way backwards in short form, and then in that pilot think, well, how can I set up conflicts that will be unpacked and throughout those episodes, culminating in whatever the finale of that season is.
Okay, that's a very good point. So you know much more than the characters.
Yes.
So you know where you're going. So we have a question from Segundo. Segundo asks, I'm very visual. Do you ever make a chart of how the characters evolve and how they interact? Almost like string corkboard, like a detective.
It's a great question. I make things, so I think more thematically and more character driven. My boss, on the other hand, Ian, thinks much more logically. He is more of a physical sort of thinker, plot thinker. So what I actually do, I don't do it so much anymore, but I make what's called a theme map sometimes, which, as I said, I haven't done it in a number of years, but a theme map is sort of a T-chart like this, and I wish I could find one quickly for you, but I'll just draw one. So it sort of looks like this, and this is kind of the plot progression right here. And this is the theme, okay? So every time a character interacts with this line, that's where a point in the script sort of energizes what the theme is. So in most good writing, we'll say it's a feature film, in most good writing, the theme is introduced early in the script, page 3, 4, 5, something like that. So what I'll do is, this is the kind of beginning of the movie. It's not a linear model, is more so just to sort of see how many moments in the script the theme is touched on. And what you'll do is you'll draw a character that progresses on their arc, and it'll look like this. I'm drawing it, so bear with me. It'll look like this. So this is a character, okay? And then this is another character right here. Okay, this is an example. So you have character A, I can't see, character A right there, and character B right here. Okay, right here, the characters meet. And whatever, and this is a made-up movie, but whatever those characters have, whatever happens in that scene in the script is causing our main character to drive towards a theme point. Whatever this point in the script is, this point, this point, and this point, these are all moments in the script, character beats, where the theme is doubled down upon or is shown to the viewer. So in this hypothetical example, whatever this catalyst moment is, maybe it's Logan showing up to tell Kendall he's not getting the promotion. That's going to cause Kendall to interact with the theme X, Y, and Z times in different points. So this is, I made it up. I mean, years ago I made it up as a way of sort of seeing what exists in a script. I think it's useful. I kind of do it in my head now a little bit, but that's because I used to do it on paper. So for visual learners, I think make whatever works for you for whatever your specific need is. For ensembles like this, it might be really smart to have a bit of a detective style thing to see what the ramifications are in your story of different, or the consequences, ramifications of different, conflicts.
That's a great, so basically just whatever works for you.
Whatever works for you. There's nothing that is industry standard. It really is just whatever works for you.
The T-chart you shared, do you use that for film and for television as well?
I do it primarily for film, and the reason why is TV, as you saw sort of in the opening story engine slide, TV has significantly more themes than features usually, because they have to power the series for 100 episodes or 50 episodes. Features are much more standalone, movies, obviously, stories. So usually there's less themes. There's still core themes. So for TV, I don't so much do it because they're just at any given point, the theme, in this script especially, blurring the line between family and business just courses throughout the script. So there'd be 100 touches on that line of that theme. Now, I've never actually tried it for TV because of that reason, but I would assume that you could do like the same thing for like each theme, and you can sort of see like at what point theme 1, 2, and 3, and then do the same thing. And just to make sure as writers, I think it's good to do something like this. Make sure that your theme is actually making it into the script. A lot of writers sort of have the idea of, okay, well, this is what it's going to be about, and then they write it, and it's very plot heavy, and it doesn't actually, the writer doesn't inform the theme. And you have to ask yourself every 2 pages, okay, well, what is this really about? Is this scene really, propping up my theme that I said it is? This is a movie about X, Y, and Z on page 5. If the movie doesn't actually turn out to be about X, Y, and Z, then that's a false theme. And a lot of sophisticated readers and viewers will notice that. Don't know if that answers your question, but again, you sort of find what works for you and go with it.
I think that's great to know. So Catherine asks, what elements of the script inform the team that you build? For example, cinematographer, sound, etc.
So all of those things happen in TV, especially after the fact. Those are all what we call below the line positions in features and TV. So DPs, sound, all of those positions don't come into play until the pilot's been greenlit and you're prepping it. So a cinematographer will be hired by the pilot director. It's usually someone they work with closely in the past, and then they'll hire department heads and all of those things. So to answer your question, there's very little in the script writing phase that has anything to do with those positions, because when those positions come on, the script is already like very fully baked. If anything, it's in the process of sort of being turned into a shooting script, where the production designer will sort of shift things around based on meetings. But the script, like for example, this script, if you'll see, TV is usually a little bit vague in like production design. It's usually, when they're in a room, they're just in the room. It doesn't talk about the tapestries unless it's significant to the theme or the character or the conflict. So you'll see in TV, it's just very dialogue heavy, and it's very sparse when it comes to some of those just descriptive action lines.
So like in the instance of the carpet, the white carpet, that was only talked about because it was so important a detail.
Yes, thick white carpet just exudes wealth, I think. It's very expensive. The image of hot piss on cold snow is just, we all kind of know what that looks like. It's just like, what that looks like. The snow is melting and this like yellow, urine is just soaking up into the carpet. So yeah, so that's something where a production designer would say, yes, we need to have this thick yellow carpet. Outside of that, all of that creation happens after it's been greenlit, or as it goes through the green light process, and you need to convince the studio or network streaming service to actually finance it. So yes.
That's great to know. Okay, let's see. Now we have another question. When you're going through scripts, how do you know when you've hit gold? What turns you off from a script, or in other words, what script is an indicator that it is not a good fit to take on? So what are your red flags, I think is what they're asking.
That's a good question. Everyone's going to be different. For me, it's and this is going to sound cliche, but if I can't put it down. And I guess the other way around that is, if I feel the need to put it down, to check an email, or look at my phone, or take a phone call, and I don't go back to it immediately, or I don't want to go back to it immediately, then that is 99 times out of 100 a pass. The reason for that is any number of reasons. It can be slow pacing. It can be, as I said, there's no theme that actually exists. It just sort of feels like plot. That's usually a plot-heavy script. Or it can be something where the dialogue feels clunky. These are sort of like development terms that a lot of people use. It's kind of clunky dialogue. It doesn't flow. The characters don't have distinct voices. They sound the same. When you read the script, you'll see Roman, when Roman's speaking, when Shiv's speaking, when Kendall's speaking. If you shut your eyes and someone read it, you'd probably say, yeah, that's Roman, that's probably Logan, that's probably Kendall. So that's a distinct voice. You hear that a lot too. So those are a few reasons, when I'm reading script, that's what I look for.
So just making sure that you have those really distinctive voices.
Mm-hmm. Voices are a big one.
You know who that person is, how the characters speak, their cadence.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And then to sort of hop on that, it's a really good concept as an example, but maybe the script has flaws. Good writing and a good concept can be fixed. Good writing and a bad concept, is it trickery? You'll pass on it, but it'll take you a little longer to pass on it. Bad writing, bad concept is kind of an immediate pass. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
We should make a chart of that. That's very good to know.
Yeah, and those are like the three sort of, or the three tiers, I guess you should say.
We need to draw that out for everyone. Also, everyone, I'm going to give you, let's say, can we do 10 more minutes? Will, do you think you have 10 more minutes of questions?
Yeah, sure.
So 10 more minutes, everybody. So get your questions into the question bar. We're wading through them. There's lots of great questions. Emily asks, is it enough just to have a good pilot? As in, if you don't have any experience in the industry, if you have a good pilot, is that enough to get you written, get you read?
Pilots are a little tricky because they're hard to sell as series. Series are very expensive endeavors. So they're ongoing endeavors too. They're 100 episodes, 20, whatever they are, 20 episodes. In TV also, the writer is the head of everything, the showrunner. A lot of times in TV especially, there exists a hierarchy of writers that doesn't so much exist in features, where a showrunner is typically someone who has, for lack of a better word, like paid their dues as a writer and has worked their way up the staff writer ladder. So they start as writer's assistants and they sort of, staff writer, so on, co-producer, producer, co-EP, EP, and now they're ready to run a show. Every now and then you get a hit like a Lena Dunham or Diablo Cody or someone like that has a show that's just such a unique voice that there's a risk that's taken on that person. But to answer your question, I think professionally writing features is an easier path forward to a sale unless you either partner with a more senior writer to actually be the showrunner. To do that, you go through a producer. Like, for example, if Emily sent me a pilot that I really liked it, then we have a stable of showrunners that we know and work with, and we can take that pilot to them. Not all showrunners want to help create someone else's idea, and some do. So it's just circumstantial that way. So I say TV is much more of a I paid my dues, you pay your dues sort of system. Features, on the other hand, is a good feature script is a good feature script. And it doesn't matter who wrote it, where they live, what they do, none of that stuff matters. So that's where the business is a little different in writing. TV is just that hierarchy a lot of times that features is just not always.
Okay, that's good to know. So basically, would anyone ever write a pilot just as a sample, as a follow-up question?
Yes. I actually think that most pilots, the harsh reality is that most pilots probably end up being good samples just because of how much weight showrunners have in that side of the business. To get something made does typically require some pretty heavy backing by creatives. So I think that writing a procedural or writing a spec of like Dave or a show like that or something like Atlanta, whatever it might be, that or Succession, that's a really good example for a writer who's willing to then move to LA or New York and actually go up that writing ladder. You'll need to show that you can write on someone else's writing. And that's why TV is so important, is because, to write episode 2 of Succession, you have to understand the pilot. You have to understand the voice in the pilot. You have to be able to write Kendall like Kendall. You have to be able to write Tom like Tom, or else it's going to be obvious that this writer isn't quite ready yet to be staffed. So most of those pilots or those specs, the scripts do end up becoming samples. The one thing, as I said, is find a spec to write. Find a pre-existing show and write your own episode of it that does not exist. And that's a really good sample.
And that's
managers like to see those things.
Okay, and so that should be part of your portfolio of writing.
Absolutely.
Get a manager. Okay, that's
it's not
great.
as much fun, but it's much more practical use of time in terms of this business.
Great insight. Let's see, Pamela asked, how many episodes should one have when presenting the pilot?
That's show dependent. So if it's a streaming show, 8 episodes, 10 episodes. If it's a network broadcast procedural, 22 episodes. I would probably say if you're pitching, you want to have the whole first season sort of fleshed out, whether it be in your mind or on paper. Especially the fewer episodes, the more you should have. So if it's like a 6-episode Queen's Gambit, you should have all 6 pretty noodle. The 22 episodes, they require you to have every single episode of Law and Order in that season. But you can say, in this episode, this happens. In this episode, this happens. Because we know it's going to be any given Sunday of an episode.
So that's good insight. Now, Vicky asked if a pilot is produced, how likely, and I think this is what you were just talking about, how likely will the writer be involved with writing for the series or being a staff writer?
If, again, that's circumstantial, so this is not set in stone, but I'm just sort of going off statistics. If you're a writer that doesn't have a lot of weight as a writer, and you're a really good writer and have a really good pilot, a lot of times a buyer will find a showrunner that they pay under a deal, like an overall deal or a first look deal, and they'll kind of put them on the show if they're interested. They'll then take over running the show. A lot of times your reps, at that point you would have a rep because they'd make a deal for you. They would hopefully negotiate. You get a created by credit, like those things you would get because you created the show, but you would be ideally placed in that room as a staff writer for 2 seasons, and then hopefully when that senior showrunner is sort of bored of the show and moves on to the other show, you can then take over that show. So that's like the ideal world is you run it yourself, but that's a very difficult job. You need to be trained in that job. So for those of you writers that are willing to sort of move into one of the development hubs, LA, New York, London, whatever, that's kind of, I think, the best way to be prepared is to want to be in the writer's room, writing on your own show, but being run by someone else and learning how to run a show that way.
Okay, that's good insight if you're on that track.
Yeah.
Tia asked a question. Tia said, can you define what you mean by hybrid premise?
So a premise pilot is usually a pilot that is kind of just that, where it's like, so like Weeds is a premise pilot. Weeds is, if you remember the show Weeds, it kind of begins with Nancy Botwin's husband dying. We don't see it happen, but it has just happened. So a premise pilot is like the day, like yesterday is different than today. And we're coming in today. Maybe we're coming in like this morning or like last night, but either way, like time has changed. We're in a new world. Not like a Lord of the Rings sense, but I'm saying in a conflict sense. By hybrid, I sort of mean, and this is what I like about the pilot myself, is that it feels like this is just another day for them a little bit, but the stakes are slightly higher. So that's why I said in my opening spiel, and I read it, and that's why I wanted to read it. It feels like last year the same thing could have happened, and every time they get together, the same thing happens. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it does. And that's what's kind of interesting about the family, and it kind of gives you weird hope for the future, is that they're never going to heal themselves. Or I mean, not hope, but pessimism. They're never going to be they're always going to be dysfunctional, and they've always been dysfunctional. And that's sort of what I call a semi-premise pilot or hybrid premise pilot.
Okay, that's good to know. Also, while we're talking about succession a little bit and the family conflict, that's still going on. And I'm going to say that maybe beginning of next year, January-ish, we might do another webinar with Will as he breaks down the season ending, right? For succession.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this the other day, and to participate in that, you'll have to watch, I think, all 3 seasons, because it'll be the season 3 finale. But I think what's interesting is if, for those of you that either have not seen the series or have not read the pilot yet, some of these might feel a little vague, and that's why maybe you should go back and watch it again. Watch this again. But the season 3 breakdown will be interesting because hopefully we'll all have a really good grasp on who these characters are, and we can like really dig into the cause and effect and where they were in the pilot versus the season 2 episode 1 and so on and so forth. So I think it'll be a really cool exercise.
This is going to be a really cool exercise. So everyone who's here, just stay tuned for Will's next 3 cliffhanger, right? As we go into season 4. you'll
And I
have
have
no.
not seen season 3 yet, so I need to go familiarize myself with it.
Yeah, me too. Now I'm going to go binge. I've got to watch all of it. But the idea that we can now look at the pilot and the way that the characters were launched and the scenarios, and then go and see how the cliffhanger was built as well. So I think that's going to be a great exercise for everyone. Speaking of Succession, Ria said, if you could pick one scene in Succession, what in the pilot, what made you lean back in your seat and think, okay, this is a show that needs to be taken seriously? What was that one scene in Succession in the pilot?
That's a really good question. The non-answer is that it's all working. Does that make sense? But I also have the perspective knowing that it's a hit show. So I don't see how anyone could read it and be like, this is crap, if that makes sense. Because then obviously like your taste, you don't have any at that point, I guess, according to the critics. But to answer your question, well, so the scene that is the most pivotal is this when they all go to his birthday party and he pulls them into his office privately and he tells them, 1, Kendall, you're not getting promoted, I'm staying on. 2, I need you all to sign this, you have till 4 o'clock. Kendall already signed it. That's the most pivotal scene where you realize, wow, there's a lot going on here. How those kids respond to that in the subsequent scene, from that point then to the bathroom, that's I think where the pilot really starts to. So I think and that's to be expected around page 35 of a 70-page pilot. That's the middle. Like we should have a pretty good grasp of where this is headed. So if you look at that point, 35 to 55, that range, that's where the really pivotal scene starts to take place.
Okay, that is a great
question. I don't know if I even answered that. I'll probably rethink it when we're done.
I think you did a great job. Now, Ekshi says, what do you think is the most undermined and overlooked element from writers who are trying to get into the industry? What do you think is the most overlooked point when they're trying to get into the industry?
Can you read that one more time?
Yes. What do you think is what is most overlooked by writers who are trying to make it into the industry? What do you think they overlook the most?
I think that we'll talk about TV, right? I think they overlook the need to know where their show is going the most. I think that from a practical standpoint, that again, I say it feels obvious, but it's very not done all that often. Knowing where the characters are going more than anything, and knowing how to use their story engines to push their characters through the story, which is the theme. But I would say know where your first season's heading. And like when I read this, I have no idea where this show's heading. If I had no idea where this show's heading, but I want to know where it's heading, and that's the intersection that you want to. That's suspense. And now if I met with Jesse and I said, where's it going? And he's like, honestly, like they're all gonna, I don't know, they're all gonna stab each other in the back. I'd probably be like, are we gonna really invest $100 million in this guy, in Jesse? Right. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I think is the most overlooked thing by writers.
And I think also maybe adding to that, just knowing that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, I mean we get passed on more than we sell. That's the harsh reality, and this is my rah-rah speech, but I always do it because it's a war of attrition, and if you want to be a writer, you will be passed on, and just know it's subjective. And as I said, now with perspective, we can read Succession and say this is amazing, but I guarantee you Succession got passed around town. Breaking Bad took 10 years to get made. Mad Men took like 15 years to get made, or something like that, and these are some of the greatest shows of the past 20 years. The greatest shows ever. So, just because it's not for someone doesn't mean it's the writing, doesn't mean, and it might be the right. I mean, it might have. So don't think it doesn't need to be fixed or changed if someone passes on it. Look for the trends, try to find the reasons why they're passing, and then apply those notes to revisions. But also don't get down on it, because it is a very hard thing to do, is to write something first and foremost, and then to sell something. So I would say keep doing what you do, and just know that try to take advice when it's there, but make sure it's good advice. And that's up to you to decide as a writer.
That's great advice. I think we should probably take one more question, but I think that's a great place to end. And I agree. And that's the thing is, it is as you said, it is just a war of attrition. And stay true to yourself and to your voice and to your passion, I think, and just keep working at it because it is a craft as well.
Yeah, and you're always evolving. I mean, and I love this exercise because I was telling my wife, like, I learned a lot about development from doing this exercise specifically with this specific pilot, where I didn't know it, a week ago, and I do know it now, and I'll apply that to future projects. So everything, and when I teach Stage 32 classes, same thing. I always learn more from my students than they probably learn from me, just in terms of how they think about story. And so it's all kind of, it's a learning exercise. If you look at it that way, it kind of is exciting.
It is. It's very synergistic, and when you teach. What do they say? If you really want to learn something, know something well, teach it. And I think that's very,
it's
very
absolutely
true.
true.
Nicole has a question. Would you consider Big Little Lies a premise series?
You guys can. I didn't watch Big Little Lies, so I don't know. My wife watched it and read it. I think it's probably a premise pilot because I know what it's about. But I don't remember how it starts. I don't remember how our way into that show. If there are so an example of that would be if they're just living their normal lives and then like a body turns up, that's a premise pilot. If they're just living, so like Everybody Loves Raymond as an example is not a premise pilot. That's it's like episodic. A lot of times episodic series are not premise. The premise being like the premise is set up in the pilot. So I'm sorry, that's a non-answer.
No, that's a great question.
Liam Moriarty is a hit writer, so I need to go.
Well, I think we are running out of time, and I don't want to take any more of your time. You've been so great to answer all these questions and just dig in and give us so much information. I think we all want to go back and watch the pilot again and then read the script.
Yeah.
And watch this again so that we can see the page numbers and go back and actually dig into a lot of your conflict stacking and all of that. I think it's going to be a great exercise for all of us.
If I can leave them with one thing, is writers, it's to look at the cause and effect. I have not seen a script, at least not in my memory, that is so clearly set up, payoff, set up, payoff, set up, payoff, that has a actual impact in a story. And by cause and effect, I mean someone does something and it causes someone else to react, and you think it's a reaction and it actually might be planned in the first place. And that's what makes these sort of like family, political, financial shows like Billions, same thing, interesting, is that you never know if something's a plan or by accident. So read it from that lens a little bit and see if you can't pinpoint some of those areas.
That's a great ending thought. So again, Will, thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us from all around the world. And again, you will get a copy of this. Don't worry, it will be sent to your Stage 32 profile. And don't forget to hop into the chat, grab the link, go to stage32.com/plan-VIP, 30 days in the writer's room, and go into the lounges. If you have other questions or other comments or thoughts, you can always share it in the Screenwriting Lounge on Stage 32. And we'll be back beginning of next week to talk about season 3.
How it wraps up.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much.
No, thank you guys.
Thanks,
have a good day.
Wonderful day.
You
Thanks,
too.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.